and 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Palm Industries. I have maintained for a long time that pepper spray is a way underused tool in law enforcement, and I get it. When you have to arrest someone, you do not want to have to get that stuff on you. But in personal defense or concealed carry scenarios, you want to create standoff and increase the distance, not go hands-on. I can tell you hundreds of stories about confrontations I have been involved with in real life that were resolved with some form of less lethal long before a gun would have been an option. Why not carry some in your pocket? Palm pepper spray is small, easy to carry, and it's effective. If you need something in between harsh words and a gun, this is a $12 solution. It's available on Amazon, makes a great gift. Go check them out at palmpepperspray.com. That's palm, P-O-M, pepperspray.com.
And this is Jim. This episode is also brought to you by ManusX. We've talked a lot about the tactical fantasy on this podcast, and one of the quickest ways to break your tactical fantasies and actually improve your performance is by getting real feedback. One of the ways you can do that is with ManusX. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, data, and coaching. And you need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Manus is a family of training devices that tracks you while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a drill and coaches you as you go. It is indispensable to taking your shooting to the next level. Go find them on manusx.com.
All right, Jim. So we've been kind of serious lately. We've been, life has been kind of serious. Work's been kind of serious. And I think the show's been kind of serious. So I guess we're going to lighten that up a little bit, huh?
Yeah, tactical tangents, everything's life and death, and oh my God, the world's going to explode tomorrow if you don't practice your somersaulting through windows enough. You don't, if you have the wrong 300 blackout loaded up in your 1911. So yeah, we probably should, ease off.
Just chill the fuck out a little bit.
More successful podcasts out there, ones people actually like and subscribe to. Sometimes they'll drink a beer and they'll talk to each other about things, life, and I don't know, fucking marriage advice or whatever. I don't think
a terrible idea.
I don't think that's. I don't think we're specialists in that. but it might be worthwhile. Give our audience maybe some insights on us and life outside of our little microcosm of subject matter we talk about.
That's actually going to be my next act. Whenever I hang the hat on Tactical Tangents, I'm going to start like a
relationship advice with Mike and Jim.
I don't know about relationship advice, but it's something. Anyway, you reading anything, watching anything lately, Jim?
So I forgot how to read a long time ago. I only listen to audiobooks. Like that's how I consume information now. So I actually, this is how we prepare for our episodes. I actually type out a lot of, kind of my outline of what I'm going to talk about. And I said, yeah, I'm reading Scouting for Boys. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right. So the guy who invented, so the guy who invented Boy Scouts, which I was never part of, for the record, wrote a book. Robert Baden-Powell, the guy who came up with the Boy Scouts idea, wrote a book back in the day called Scouting, for Boys. And
comma, that's an important, grammar matters, it turns out.
Yeah.
Punctuation and stuff. Yeah.
I have a young man in my house, and I'm trying to figure out how to, introduce him to adventures in the woods and that kind of thing. And so I thought this would be a good starting point. So I'm listening to that as an audiobook, Scouting for Boys, and it's, or Scouting for Boys. And, it's kind of neat. And one of the things that I don't think is obvious to people about how Boy Scouts started, and I'm not recruiting for them, I'm not pitching for them, but it's an interesting story, is he wanted to create basically spies. He wanted the types of people who could be good on their own.
It's a different kind of scouting.
Have powers of observation and, be the advanced party in whatever endeavor you're working. And I thought that was kind of neat. So I kind of liked his approach to stuff. The other one that I'm doing, because I like serious stuff, is Uncontrolled Spread, which This sounds like my high school experience. It's like a pretty serious objective deep debrief after action review of COVID. And it was written by one of the FDA director, commissioner guys. And he just kind of goes decision by decision through things the government was doing, like what the Chinese were doing, what the American government was doing. And, you know, there's like the pop culture, you know, pop concept of, oh, it was Trump did this or Biden did this, whatever. This is much more, no, at the senior bureaucrat level, what kinds of decisions they were trying to make with the information they had. And I get a kick out of it. I like stuff like that, you know, the case study kind of thing. It's kind of a case study of the first couple of months of COVID. So yeah, that's what I'm up to. What about you?
So I've downloaded some audiobooks, but I haven't read them yet. I got Hazard Lee's book. Hazard Lee's the F-35 pilot we had on the show.
Oh yeah, we had him on the show.
And I was on his podcast once, and he wrote a book that I have downloaded. I haven't started listening to it. It's called 1 second.
It's Art of Thinking or Thinking Fast or something like that.
The Art of Clear Thinking.
Clear Thinking.
Art of Clear Thinking. Pretty excited about that one. He actually narrated himself, so it's cool. And I also downloaded a book. It's called The Daily Dad, and it's basically like 365 meditations on Stoic philosophy about parenting, and it's supposed to be just kind of like a thought of a short 1-page thought of the day kind of thing. That I haven't really set that trend going yet, but I downloaded it. It's on my phone.
So it's funny. You know, Mike and I BS all the time about how we don't have any time. We're all super busy. And Mike's like, yeah, I'm going through Stoic meditations. Like, well, of course you're too busy. You're doing Stoic meditations or some shit.
Well, to be clear, I'm not doing it. It's just on my phone, supposedly.
Well, that counts. That's close enough.
Most of my time is spent working and parenting. That's basically it.
Mm-hmm. Man, we working and parenting, that becomes all you do. Mike, we did an episode about burnout. Maybe you should download it, give it a listen, like and subscribe. That'll be good. There's some of that. I've actually been thinking pretty serious about taking a little like solo me time vacation somewhere. I got to afford Vegas,
that.
Baby, Vegas.
Yeah, probably not Vegas. No, that's not really the vibe I'm going for. But maybe like the mountains or something like that. Take my guitar. There's lots of that. Playing my guitar. That's kind of my whoopee right now.
So you're playing like coffee shops and stuff now, right?
Yeah. Coming to a dive bar near you on Tuesday nights is no. I'm not doing that.
Don't hold out on us. Play us like a riff.
Yeah, no. We want to keep people listening, Jim.
Play Stairway. Play Freebird. Do whatever it is you do.
Totally.
Is there some song you like playing though?
I like playing all kinds of stuff. I've always been accepting of country and liked country, but since picking up the guitar, I've gotten like way into country. A lot of the rock stuff, like there's always a lot of guitars, right? There might be 2 or 3, sometimes even more guitars on the stage. And so it's hard for like one guy to really replicate that. So I've been doing a lot more country, but
I, for one, propose that we do a Mike solo episode where it's just him riffing on the guitar. Yeah. If anyone wants to hear that, I want you to get on the comments and let us know what songs, give us a request list, and he'll do what he can for you.
Yeah. Just a little bit of rock, a lot of country, and whatever.
All right.
So are we just going to fuck around all night here, Jim, or is there something you actually want to talk about tonight?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, we should probably like do an episode if we're going to go ahead and go through all the work of like turning on all the machinery and stuff. We are getting into...
We're going to make Vince sit down and edit this. I mean, after all.
Yeah. Vince is awesome, by the way. If you guys haven't listened to our Vince episode, that's also a classic. He's a smart dude. Infantry NCO, which is not my specialty, not Mike's specialty. So it was cool to bring him in and have him talk about checking out your gear. So we're going into the summer months, and in the summer in the military, that's when we have a lot of our PCSs, guys move, right, from assignment to assignment. And it's also when we do our changes of command, a lot of our big organizational shifts. And every time you get like a change of command, either the outgoing guy or the incoming guy will like wax poetic on their leadership philosophy. It's actually like taught, like, you know, sit your guys down, you know, give them your intent, give them your left and rights and stuff like that. So you hear a lot of those during the summer. And so I've been thinking about that quite a bit. And in the military and public service, we have this natural institutional tension, I would say, between mission and people. And so a lot of these speeches that I hear often deal in like, well, it's people first, mission always, or mission first, people always, or something like that. I don't even know.
Sounds
the
lame.
idea. Yeah. The idea being, it is. The idea being that the mission in a lot of cases is dangerous and it's draining. So commanders have to make this like constant choice between either taking care of the mission or taking care of their troops, right? They're making a choice, and sometimes the mission's going to win, sometimes the troops are going to win. And like this question comes up at every professional military education program I've ever seen. And I've now heard at least 69 commanders give me their unique and utterly brilliant interpretation of how they're going to balance it.
This is totally new. You've never heard this.
People always. Okay, thanks, buddy. Golf clap. You cracked the code on military leadership. Got it. So I hear it so much that honestly, like, it's a warning sign for me. When I hear like a new commander talk about mission and people, I'm like, ugh. That I wanted you to figure out when you were like a lieutenant. And here you are, Colonel, sir.
There's a lump.
I'm cheering you on, but let's get past this. Okay. So I want to understand it. I want, especially like our young leaders, both in law enforcement, military, anything, to do your wrangling with it here as you drive into work and not at your next change of command. Figure it out now would be my ask. So that's why I want to kind of talk about it tonight. Mission or people. And I would offer it is obviously a false choice.
Yeah, why has it got to be one or the other? A binary thing. This kind of reminds me of like the safety third idea.
Yes.
Like, or safety first, you know, it's like
safety always.
Like, safety first, you know, and in law enforcement, people make this, they're all about officer safety. Their officer safety is not really good. Like it's this kind of abstract thing and everything is about officer safety. And it's like, is it though? Like you wouldn't need a gun and body armor at work every day if safety was the number one priority. You would just stay home. And yes. when we put that up front, it's like everything we want to do, we want to do as safely as possible, but it's not one or the other. It's not either stay safe or be reckless.
Yeah.
It's the balance.
Yeah. So how do we find that balance? I don't know. And clearly a lot of bosses I've had don't know either.
Well, they think they know.
Yeah, because I have definitely had some bosses who did not take care of their people. And I've definitely had bosses who got so fixated on trying to solve everyone's problems that they let the mission kind of flounder. And that's no good either, right? Like you have to find some balance. So really, as a leader, you've got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Now, if you burn up the people, the mission's not going to happen, right? Mission doesn't get done unless you have the people that do the job. People are our most important resource, and that is actually true. But without a mission, there's no point in having people on the payroll. You're there to do a thing, right? So, as with a lot of decision making and leadership-y stuff, it depends. Well, okay, cool. It depends. Well, here's a clue. Just saying it depends also doesn't solve the problem,
stop there, right?
That's the beginning of a conversation, not the end of a conversation. So, okay, it depends. Okay, great. Patton, what does it depend on? Well, first, maybe your organization. Different organizations are different, and it matters a lot as far as where that balance needs to fall. So, are you the commander of the 437th Volleyball Sustainment Company?
Yes.
Well, if so, then, you've got one balance of people versus mission. Maybe we don't need to die for the volleyballs today, right? Or are you the super secret National Nuclear Hostage Rescue Assassin Unit, Well, if so, maybe that pendulum swings way hard into your mission, right? If it is an absolute no joke, no fail kind of mission, right? Like the people who guard nuclear bombs, sometimes I expect them to accept some hardships if it keeps us all from dying.
Pretty gosh darn serious, I would
right?
say.
So read the room a little bit. So, first off, before you do anything else, figure that out. You need to understand where your organization falls on that mission spectrum. And also, that mission focus has to be part of your new guy orientation and indoctrination. And this is important, indoctrination. How do we bring new guys into the fold and get them to think the way we need them to think about where they fall? Okay? Where I see units get weird, and I've seen several, is when the troops get their expectations displaced, right? They get hired thinking they're going to have one lifestyle, and then a year in, they realize they have a very different lifestyle. And sometimes, things happen. The war kicks off, COVID hit, right? And then everything changed. Okay, cool. When that happens, sometimes you got to lead people through a reset. You have to reset expectations. But generally speaking, a lot of organizations are pretty steady state. Okay, so as they come in, you sit them down. You say, hey, you are in a mission first unit. And you can be blunt about that, and maybe you should be blunt about it early as they come in, as they walk through the door. Explain, like, hey, up front, we are going to ride you hard, and we're going to put you away wet. That way, they at least know what they're getting into, right?
Yeah, this is a place where things have consequences.
Yeah,
and it's a big deal.
And where I see that in like a law enforcement context, and might be able to explain better, is like the special teams. Welcome to the SWAT team. This is not a 9 to 5.
Yeah, this is high risk stuff. But the thing about it is, I think a big part of the whole philosophical, because a lot of what Jim is talking about is the culture, right? You're trying to, when you talk about indoctrinating someone, it's the culture of that team or that organization, and it's different. Like law enforcement at large is kind of its own little subculture, and then you've got agency to agency, and then within those agencies, different geographic divisions might have their own kind of culture to it. Like the county guys have a different culture than the city guys, and then within those other teams, like you're saying, like the undercover guys have their own kind of culture. The SWAT and K9 guys have their kind of culture. Like we all kind of have our thing, and having that little sit down with them is something that, like, if you think about it, like most of those assignments, if you're talking about the special teams, they draw the sort of people like us, whatever unit that is, they draw that kind of person for a reason.
Oh, yeah.
And so what leaders have to recognize when they have that sit down is that, like, on some level, they probably already get that. Like, they're probably here for that mission, right? And it's okay to put the mission first in that sense, but not to the detriment of your people all the time. Like we've been on a big kick lately in my team about, like, wouldn't it be nice to not have to do a SWAT school every year to replace the people that leave? Like, because the turnover, we burn people out, we churn through people. They can only do it for so long. It's hard on the families and all that. So I think from a leadership sit down perspective, like you're saying, Jim, I think we also have to, like, recognize that they kind of already get that on some level.
Yeah, and specifically you are hiring for that, right? That is part of your screening process, is you're looking for people who understand that, right? And people who realize, and by the way, you need to realize that comes with a cost in terms of the types of people you're going to get. You're weeding out a lot of talent when you do that, and how long you can keep those people. Mission first people burn themselves out pretty fast. Right? They tend to be sprinters, not marathoners. And we've talked about that in other episodes, like talent management, right? So it depends on the unit, and you get a lot of say in terms of where your unit falls on that spectrum, right? Some units, it's obvious you're one part of it or another. Some units, it's not, right? And if you are working one little small subsection of the unit with some special team, you as a leader get to decide a little bit where that falls, right? It also depends on the situation that day. Even if you're in the 437th Volleyball Sustainment Company, maybe this month, oh my God, there's some volleyball crisis, right? And it requires you to put your, scheduled unit barbecues and pedicures on hold, and you got to put your guys on 24-hour shifts to get those volleyballs out. That's good. Okay. Well, recognize when the situation dictates that. Okay, guys, we got to turn it on right now. Let's go. Boom. Okay. Also recognize that crisis, the environment that is a crisis, is super addictive. It is like crack to leaders, okay? Because it's a pass. It lets leaders ignore taking care of people, and it allows them to stay short-sighted. I just have to get through right now. I just have to get through tonight. We just have to get through this crisis.
5-meter targets.
And then the next 5-meter target pops up, the next 5-meter. And then if you stay in that steady state crisis, you get the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 years. So those were good times. I enjoyed that for the last 20 years of my career. And crisis is fun. Honestly, it's even fun to be part of it. But at some point, you got to be able to lead the unit out of the crisis. And there's an art and science to that. You have to
off-cycle it, right?
Oh, yeah. Or you have to supplement it. Okay, we're in a crisis. Cool, we're going to be in a crisis forever. Now I need the resources and manning to steady state. So maybe we need to hire twice as many people so I can work, 8-hour shifts instead of 24-hour shifts. And it's easy to say and it's hard to do. Exactly. Hiring more people. I just need more money and more people.
Obviously. Don't we all?
Obviously. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, guy.
Get in line, kids.
But you might have to have a courageous conversation with the real leaders, the big guys, about what you need in order to make that happen, or set some expectations for the big leaders. Hey, we cannot do this forever. I need you to figure out what you're willing to cut. And that crisis mindset thing is also one of the reasons I get pissy when I hear people talk about being a leader and not just a manager. You want to be a leader, not just a manager. Bullshit. That line is bullshit. Because you can be as motivational as you want, and if you don't manage your resources well, you're going to burn them. And you're going to lead that organization straight into the ground, because you've got to keep your people functioning, right?
There's another aspect of this that I think about in terms of kind of internalizing that people are your most valuable resource. And it's more than just saying that, like, well, without the team, this is all run by people, and so the people are the most. Yeah, and it's also the biggest part of your budget, your payroll. Typically, like in a lot of cases, is just your manpower and your labor costs and stuff. But I think there's another like angle to that, is appreciating just the human factors in general, in terms of like being mission effective. And like in law enforcement, when I think about this, it's when a cop makes a mistake and it gets caught on camera, and a police chief has to give like a statement about an event, right? Like a press conference or something like that. It's not wrong to just be like, yeah, like this was less than ideal. We made some mistakes. We've got some training issues to work on. Like, we're human. Like, the people are human. And I think when you frame it in the way that's like understanding of that, like it gives you a little bit of perception on like, you want to know how we prevent some of those mistakes and have good performance out of our people. Like, don't burn them out, take care of them better, make sure that they cycle off of this stuff, make sure that they understand the balance of the culture and all those things. Like, it's also a performance and effectiveness thing, like productivity of the whole unit or the whole organization is related to all of that.
Yes. And kind of a tangent off of that is, when you say people are your most important resource, don't just tell people they're the most important resource, right? You got to kind of put your money where your mouth is.
Well, that's, yeah.
And relatedly, the military loves doing like big stand downs. Okay, we're going to sit everyone down. We're going to take a knee and we're going to think about how important it is to go work out. It's like, you know what's even better? Give me the time to go work out. So, and don't just talk at me about it. Right?
Exactly right. And that's kind of where I was going with this in terms of like giving me the people and the resources to, it's also, hey, maybe it means let them take a break. Maybe it means like, hey, why don't you take the rest of the day off? Like you just had this. I remember there was a call that I was involved with. I was a witness officer to a shooting where the guy wanted to commit suicide by pointing a gun at me and my dog, and another officer shot him. And like at the end of that, they were just like, because I wasn't the one that pulled the trigger, like I just went back in service. And for me, it was like kind of fine. I was, I'm like, whatever. I had other questions and other concerns about this whole incident. But if you think about it, like, should that guy go back to work? Like, should I just go back to taking calls the rest of the day? Or should I maybe go home and take a breather? There's two different ways to look at that, right? A supervisor should have caught that. And also, you, I think, should have caught that and said, hey guys, I'm going to take a minute. And there's like the self-awareness that we need operators to have, right? Well, sure. And I certainly didn't exactly go like out looking for trouble and took it easy. And I have the ability to, to send myself home, I guess, if I had to as well. Yeah. And in this context, this one wasn't one that got me. This wasn't one of those calls that disturbed me or that kept me up. I mean, it wasn't one of those, and so it was fine. And I had that self-awareness. I've had those nights where I'm like, I'm done. I'm out. I'm going home. But it's recognizing things like that. Like the time to work out, I think, is a perfect example. Like you want your guys to be, you're invested in the wellness stuff. Like give them the time to actually do it. Yes. Deal. Invest in that.
And people will notice when you don't, right? Your troops are not dumb. They will catch on. Yeah. They will catch on when you get up in front of everyone and say, okay, it's December. Everyone, we're going to take a knee. It's Christmas. Oh, and by the way, I need all the shops manned to at least 100% manning throughout Christmas. So you're when you talk out of both sides of your mouth on something like that, everyone will know. Okay. Speaking of like supervisors and stuff and what they should catch on to, it is hard to manage both the mission and the people as one leader, as one boss. This is tough. Okay. You need to be able to delegate some responsibility for the mission and some responsibility for the troops. Okay. Most military and even most public service agencies have leadership teams. And this is one of those things, like psychologically, cognitively, when you're the leader, you feel kind of all alone. I'm the guy at the top. It's lonely at the top, up on top of this mountain in this motivational poster. Guess what? That's not how the real world works. You've got a team around you. You got to use them, right? Your deputy is not and shouldn't be just a mini version of you. That buys you nothing, okay? And if you think about like, I don't know, on the law enforcement side, on the military side, you've got like a platoon leader and a platoon sergeant, or a team leader and team sergeant, squadron commander, first sergeant, squadron commander, and the director of operations, or in the Navy, the XO, right? The skipper and the XO. Whatever that is in your organization, don't forget that you're not the only one. You've got a team around you, right? Use them. And if you don't feel like you have a leadership team, build it, because you're going to need it. Okay. Within that team, you need at least one person who is specifically charged to look out for the morale, health, and welfare of the people. Right. And they have to be the advocate for the people in the room. Okay. And you need at least one person who is looking out for the mission. You can't do all that at once. It's too much. You probably have too many people, right? The most any one person can really supervise well is about 4 elements or sub-elements. Okay. So you have to delegate and you have to trust, but you also have to balance and balance out the strengths, and you got to balance out the strengths and weaknesses of your own leadership team. Some dudes are just way better at handling mission stuff. Some dudes are just way better at handling the squishy people things, right? Figure out who's who. Generally speaking, you need a cheerleader. Good job, guys. A+.
You're all doing great.
You're all doing great. I want to see big smiles tomorrow. Let's get some good news in here tomorrow, okay? And you need a hammer.
They're like, fuck off.
But you also need the hammer. You need the guy who's like, hey, you screwed that up. Oh, and by the way, work starts at 7:30. I want to see you here at 7:30, right? You need both. And if you try to be both, you end up coming across a little schizophrenic. Or bipolar. So, having that be separate personalities is sometimes good, right? And, different communities that call them different things like good cop, bad cop, or mom and dad on a special forces team, right? Whatever you want to call it, whatever metaphor you want to use, what you can't have, and many units often get, is two good cops, where everyone's a cheerleader and no one is looking out for the mission. Or you get two bad cops, where everyone's
a dickhead.
Everyone's a dickhead. That's called the army. So, you also have to be careful that the mission guy doesn't always trump the people guy. And where this gets funny is rank, right? So if the commander is the mission guy and then the team sergeant is the people guy, well, when you have to flip your rank for it, the mission's always going to win. And maybe it should, but hopefully you got some arbitration in there, some way to mediate and arbitrate that, right? So say you're the big boss as a commander, and whether that's a chief of police, the sheriff, the company commander, the brigade commander, the squadron commander, whatever, you have to strike the right balance based on your unique mix of mission, organization, people, situation. Cool. Okay, that's why you get paid the big bucks and I don't. But how do you manage that? Well,
you're doing great, Jim. You're doing great.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So first, you get what you measure for. Let me say this again. How do you manage this balance? One of the ways you do it is you measure for it. You get what you measure for. So when you're demanding metrics from your guys, when you have your staff meetings, and you're like, I want to see good stats on what we're doing, right? Think about what metrics you're asking for. Use metrics that matter, right? And think about this. Like, how do I look out for my people? What metrics tell me that the people are getting taken care of? Well, there's some obvious ones. If all my dudes are getting DUIs, that's a sign, right? If all my guys are getting arrested for domestic violence, that's a sign. I'm in the Air Force, so we don't typically have much of that stuff. We get, my guys are kind of depressed today, and that's nothing to joke about, but it is a real thing that you see, especially like, intel units and stuff have a lot of that, right? But just big picture, generally speaking, are guys getting hurt? That's a key metric. You should have some idea of how often dudes are getting hurt in any sense, on duty, off duty, whatever. Okay. Are guys leaving? Do I have an attrition rate? If you don't know your attrition rate, you are not managing your force. And it's one of those things, I've seen it a lot. No one wants to talk about it. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about the fact we don't talk about it. Do you think that's healthy? Fixating on it may not be healthy, but pretending it's not a thing, that's not helping you either. Okay?
And understand the difference between like an attrition rate. People come and go. There are chapters and acts to anyone's career in these mission-focused type of units, and that's okay. But you have to like have a sober view of that. I mean, for one thing, you should be able to see what that lifespan is like, right? And this is something that we talked about in the talent management episode, like what that lifespan typically looks like what's the average, and have a good way of like phasing people in and out of that. Like if someone needs a break for a while, give them the break. If they're towards the end and they're just trying to hang on, like maybe there's a job that is a little bit a function that they can serve on the team that is a little bit less, strain on their family or something like that. Mm-hmm. they've earned it at that point, right? Like, so have an idea of that life cycle and know that there might be an expiration date, but you can still be kind of graceful about that, I think. And that's a big part of it as well. Yeah. But don't blow it off, I think, is Jim's point. Yeah.
Are guys taking so little vacation time that they're hitting their limits, their use-or-lose limits?
Yeah.
That's a warning sign, right? And similarly for the mission, find metrics that matter for the mission. And one of the key things on that is you want to be effects-based. What do we mean by that? There's the work you put in, and then there's the product you get out. At the end of the day, you got to measure the product. So measure what matters. In a flying unit, is that how many hours you flew? Does that tell you really anything? Is number of training events logged? Is that telling you anything? What about being green, right? How many of my guys are combat mission ready? Could I deploy today? Readiness is a big one. Can I send my guys at the door? But the funny thing about that, a lot of readiness is like dental readiness. And one of my favorite generals back in the day used to talk about, if you train the men to think, and this is back in the day when like the troops were the men, if you train them to think that dental readiness is what's important, they're going to go to war thinking dental readiness is what's important. So maybe so maybe there's some specific combat mission readiness things that we could look out for and measure for. Okay. One of the most important things you do as a boss is help give clarity to your people about what matters. I'm going to say it again because it's important. One of the most important things you do as a boss is help give clarity to your people about what matters. And one of the ways you do that is you demand metrics that matter. So Mike mentioned talent management. We talked about this a little bit earlier. This mission people thing is where the rubber meets the road on talent management. Are you hiring the right people who can work at whatever pace your organization needs to operate at? Are you onboarding them in a way where their expectations are going to match reality? Okay. Do you understand what incentives matter to these people that you're hiring? Not all people are incentivized the same way. If I were in it for money, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing.
Right.
Right.
Well, and sorry, I got to jump on this because the mission versus people thing, I mentioned earlier how we attract the people that are already kind of pre-wired for mission first mentality, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to recognize that that is a motivator in and of itself, and like be the calming force a little bit, like that's part of the talent management is to be part of the thing that like gets them in that marathon mentality.
Oh yeah. And we're going to get into that kind of as we go, but that's an important point. But figure out what incentives matter to those people. What is it they need right now? And know your people well enough to know what they need in order to be taken care of, in order to stay in the fight. For some people, that's time off. They need to be able to get out and take care of their families. For some people, that is time in. They need to go deploy. They need to go get into the mix a little bit. They need to grow and develop within the organization. Figure that out about them. So what if you're not the boss? Because the world has a lot of Indians and not very many chiefs, right?
Therein lies the rub.
Yeah. So here you are at the bottom of the totem pole, and you see this all screwed up, right? The balance is all messed up. What can or should you do? Should you get a straw and suck it up? Because we don't like your shitty attitude around here, right? Well, is whining going to fix it? Probably not. Okay. So maybe it's get salty and complain around the locker room about it. Is that going to fix it? Probably not. And this is actually really tricky, right? I say start with those same questions that we ask commanders. Are you in an organization or a situation where this balance is normal, right? Maybe you had some bad expectations. You got under the big National Hostage Rescue Nuclear Response Force or whatever it is, and you thought you were going to get weekends off. I'm sorry. That's not how they operate. Okay. So maybe you need to reset your expectations a little bit. if you look around the organization, you're like, no, we're in the volleyball sustainment unit. Okay. If it's not warranted, the most constructive thing to do is give your bosses data and options. So talk to your bosses and say, hey, I think we're a little out of whack on this. Okay. But you got to give it to them constructively. You have to give it to them in a way they can process it. You have to communicate to your bosses in a format and a language they get, which is often numbers. Okay. Data and options. One of my favorite coworkers used to say spreadsheets or spread cheeks. If you got a problem, you gotta quantify it. Okay. Quantify the problem. You can communicate that problem better. Thank you. You can communicate that problem better to the management and the command tier. So write it down. Hey, I notice that we're doing this and this and this. I notice that we're losing this many guys a year. I notice that we're getting this many guys hurt. And it's not enough just to bring them a problem. You got to bring them some solutions. So is this something that you can solve with a new hire, right? Every organization's undermanned and underfunded. It's a universal scientific fact. Okay. But maybe you need to make a dedicated case. Like, no, seriously, we got to stop what we're doing. We got to get at least one more guy because that's going to get our shifts working right. Okay. Bosses understand things like getting the shifts flowing or the process flowing. Okay. Can we adjust the work schedule? Maybe we're on a, what are you on? Like a Northern Panama schedule or something like that? What's the term?
Arizona time? Like,
No. Where you work like 5 days on, 4 days off, and every other Tuesday. It's like a,
I don't know the name for it. It's all
child custody plan is what it sounds like. Yeah. Or 24 hours on, 48 off, or 8s and 12s or 6s and 9s or whatever it is. Like maybe switching to a different schedule construct might save you a lot of time and pain. Okay. Is this an area where you think the bosses need to reduce commitments that they're signing up for? And, it's kind of tried to say, do more with less. No, we got to do less with less. I've heard many, many senior officers say that. I have seen it put into practice very few times. But at some point, you got to call the baby ugly and say, hey, it is time to do less with less. We're accepting an unacceptable amount of risk. Okay.
We're just losing effectiveness across.
Yep.
And everything that we have to do.
And what you can't do is the Chicken Little, oh my God, the sky is falling, right? Because if you make a prediction that the sky is falling and then it doesn't fall, that's just going to reinforce those bad habits that you saw the bosses do. So you have to say, no, this is the cost we're already incurring, not what could happen, right? Another way to look at this whole mission people thing is figuring out where that healthy tension should be, right? In an ideal world, the lowest level troops should be faithfully and enthusiastically charging after the mission. And Mike brought this up, right? We want to hire those hard chargers. They can be mission focused because they're being taken care of. Let me say that again. They can be mission focused because they're being taken care of. And they trust you to take care of them as a leader. The leaders should be able to trust the lower level troops are taking care of the mission, that they're being hard chargers, so that the leaders, can focus on taking care of the troops. Trust is the big deal here. Well, that's great. In this magical land, we can all ride our unicorns to work. It's going to be awesome. Everyone trusts everyone.
We're all doing great.
The lower level guys are hard charging and the senior leaders are just looking out for their guys. It's perfect. Okay. That's how it's supposed to work. But how do we get there? The key, and this is counterintuitive, is middle management. Seriously. It's the NCOs and the middle tier officers who are supposed to act as like the honest broker and the representative and the go-between between the troops and the senior bosses. Okay. That strong NCO corps is very seriously the secret weapon in the American military, largely because both sides of the rank spectrum trust the NCO corps. And I don't know on the law enforcement side, like there's how we use sergeants versus how cops use sergeants and stuff and lieutenants and whatever. But
Yeah, there's some
I don't know
of
if
that
you
in
see
in
that.
the agency as a whole, but it's kind of like more of an official rank structure. And squads usually have like a lead officer somewhere in each squad. But on the SWAT team, we have like a made up rank called senior operator.
Do you now?
And like, at some point, you might get designated as a senior operator, and there's no like extra pay. There's nothing official about it, but the senior operators kind of carry some of that weight, and they're sort of that conduit like you're talking about, like you're describing.
All right. So trust is kind of the key component in there, right? And if that trust breaks down, you don't have a military unit. You have a labor dispute.
Yeah, that's problematic.
And this is the bait and shift of bait and switch of this episode. It's a labor dispute at the end of the day. And this is the biggest thing the United States Air Force Academy didn't teach me when I was getting commissioned. They said, listen to your NCOs. Well, that's true. You should listen to your NCOs. But what they don't explain is, at the end of the day, this is labor and management. And striking that balance and that trust, especially in an area where you don't actually control the pay scales and you don't really control a lot of things because it's the military, trust is the magic thing that keeps the wheels on. Okay. So one of my favorite sayings about trust and leadership is that credibility is the currency of leadership. Imagine that you get so many chips or dollars or whatever, right, to use. Monopoly money. Say you get one color of Monopoly money that's like the mission Monopoly dollars, and you get the people Monopoly dollars. And how many of each you start with depends on your organization, right? If it's super mission oriented, the guys you hired are super mission oriented. Everyone's super high quality. Maybe you get a big stack. If it is super not mission oriented, maybe you get a little stack. If there was just a big turnover in talent, maybe you don't have a whole lot of credibility with those troops right away, right? So you have to slowly work your way up. You have to build up your little stack of currency, okay? And you may be able to build up some currency on each side. But generally speaking, you got what you got. And you got to be real careful when and where you spend those dollars, okay? You only get to burn your dudes so many times before they don't trust you anymore. And if there's anything dudes notice, it's when they're getting burned. And they have a very, very long memory for it. I was asking on Facebook about this mission people thing, and a guy brought up a thing that a squadron commander said to us 15 years ago. Tonight. He brought it up because he remembered a thing a squadron commander said to all of us that made everybody mad about the mission people thing. I don't think that squadron commander meant to burn that many chips that day, but here we are. Okay. So you only get to burn so many people chips before they don't trust you anymore. You only get to burn so many mission chips so many times before you either lose the fight or get fired. Right? This is a consequential job. If you screw up the mission, maybe the Russian tanks roll through your base. That's not a thing we want, right? More often in the military, you burn the chips, you piss off enough bosses, and then you find yourself out of a job. You're the deputy in charge of counting pencils in the storage room, right?
Go to the paint room to watch paint dry.
That's right. So build up the chips when you can and spend them Build up the chips when you can and spend those chips or those Monopoly dollars, whatever, judiciously. Okay, be thoughtful about when and where you're burning your currency. So one of the biggest warning signs to me is when that tension that we talked about, where you should have the lower level hard chargers and the higher level people watcher outers, when you see that backwards, that's a big warning sign. That's a big red flag. Okay. When you have bosses who are all about the mission and troops who are all about looking out for themselves, something has gone wrong. So if you see that, that is when you need to do some of that leadership stuff they teach at leadership school. And that is an uphill battle and a hole you got to dig yourself out of, and whatever other metaphor you want to use. But the first step is recognizing it. When you're like, ooh, we have a labor dispute here. We need to resolve it in order to get the mission done. That is the challenge when you walk into a situation like that. First step is figuring out you got it. Second, you got to build up that currency. I think that's all I got. Mike, what you got?
I mean, we got real serious there.
Whew.
I know.
Real serious.
We said we weren't going to do that, but here we are.
Well, you were going to play your guitar.
Yeah, well, it's outside the scope of the show, I suppose. But my thing on this is just it does have to be both, right? It's not an either or thing. The mission is important. Like, the thing that drives us, our type of person, into the careers that we do, the professions that we do, is that sense of purpose. And it's why we're willing to make the sacrifices that we make. And we make a lot of them. And it's not just, blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, it's frankly just time. It's emotional bandwidth sometimes. It's that just the general sense of happiness at times. I mean, it wears you down. And those sacrifices are things that we make because we find the work rewarding, and that sense of purpose drives us. And the key in this, to me, is to see that from the perspective of the individuals who are passionate about the work, and then separating that passion, right, from the leadership and management stuff, which is, using that mission first idea and the drive that we all have for the work that we do as a management principle is problematic. I think that's where you run into some of those shaky leadership decisions, is if you use that mission first mentality as your driving force in how you manage people. Recognize they probably already put the mission first. Like, without really having to be told that, right? So maybe you're the one that needs to be the sort of I don't want to say the gatekeeper, but help them throttle that a little bit. Help
absolutely
manage that part of it.
Be the check on it, the check valve.
Yeah. So that's all I got.
Is it mission or is it people? Well, it's both, right? At the end of the day, it's both. And it will always depend, and you got to read the situation in the room and the people, and you got to kind of feel it out. But I want you to do your thinking about it up front, because when you take command, I want you to succeed. And if you're having to figure this out on the fly and figure out what your algorithm is for how you're going to handle things out on the fly, you probably haven't prepared enough. So, think about how you're going to run the throttle. Think about how you're going to build up your stock on taking care of your people, taking care of your mission. And one of the most important ways you can do that is delegate some of that attention among your leadership team and have that awareness of when things are getting screwed up. And one of the ways you build up that awareness is measure things that matter. I think that's all I got. I'm going to go take care of the people. And by that, I mean, go to sleep.
I'm going to go play my guitar.
Hell yeah. What are you going to play? Freebird?
I don't know. Maybe I'll learn a new song.
Play something. Dude, I'm serious. Go in the comments, guys. I want to see some requests, and we're going to have a Mike solo episode of just him doing like the Mike Coffee Shop episode.
I already know I'm going into a ridiculous work week. Like, this week is going to be stupid. So I'm just kind of like front loading my inner peace tonight a little bit. So
same boat.
Yeah.
Same boat.
Anyway, you guys should all go do the same. Take care of your inner peace. Don't rely on other people to do it for you. That's what I would say.
Yeah, go do your meditations on stoicism, like Mike.
Yeah, fuck off. Self-care, self-worth, though. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
Get to it. All right, guys, that's all we got for tonight. This episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. Drip Drop Oral Rehydration Solution is an electrolyte powder that you mix with water. It was formulated by a doctor for quick absorption. I work in the desert, and it only takes a few hours in the heat, wearing body armor, carrying around a bunch of gear before I start feeling like crap and fall behind the curve in dehydration. Drip Drop keeps you in the fight so you can finish the mission and rehab for the next one. Go get you some at dripdrop.com or on Amazon, or ask your supply guy to find it for you. Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, you can head over to Patreon, give us $1 for each new episode. That money's going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at TacTangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. And one last thing, our Facebook discussion group. We've got a little group going on Facebook. If you go to the groups tab on our page, you can join it. We've got more followers on our page than we have in the group. So I know there's some of you out there following the Facebook page that are on Facebook that are not in the group. Lots of like-minded people in there. So come hang out with us. All right. That's all we got. Good talk.